The wooden table in our front yard wasn't set for dinner today. Instead of the usual bowls of steaming rice and braised fish, the rough planks were covered in stacks of small, worn bills and Tuna's frayed, ink-stained ledger. Alex didn't wear the crisp shirt he had bought for his city meetings. He stood by the bamboo gate, wearing his faded, dirt-stained work jacket. Outside, a line of local farmers with sun-baked skin stood in absolute silence. They held crumpled hats against their chests. This wasn't a sterile corporate payday. This was the raw survival of the village, changing hands in the late afternoon sun. Henry, usually chasing stray chickens across the dirt, sat unusually still on the porch steps. His small feet, strapped in dusty sandals, kicked nervously at the wooden beams. Even at his age, he could feel the invisible weight pressing down on his parents. Tuna's hands, rough from digging in the soil, rested lightly over the mountains of cash. The stakes in this moment were brutally simple. If the math on that table was wrong, families in our village wouldn't eat this week. Hello everyone, welcome back to the quiet rhythm of our wooden house. If you are finding us for the first time, we are Alex, Tuna, and little Henry. Our massive export payment had finally arrived. It took everything we had, physically and emotionally, to secure it. But instead of taking that hard-earned money straight to the bank to recover our own exhausted savings, we pulled it all out in cash. Within the next hour, almost every single bill on that table would be gone, leaving our own pockets empty. The dust from the village road settled over the courtyard, catching the golden light of the late afternoon. A forgotten bowl of morning porridge sat cooling on the edge of the wooden veranda, a quiet reminder of how the day's normal routine had been hijacked by the arrival of the funds. It is a strange feeling to have the equivalent of a year's wages sitting entirely exposed on your outdoor dining table. The warm wind rustled through the thick bamboo leaves by the fence, and the only other sound piercing the silence was the dry, rhythmic flick of worn paper money being counted by hand. In the past, a day exactly like this would have broken Tuna. Just a year ago, handling this much intense financial pressure, knowing exactly how many children and grandparents depended on her precise calculations, would have brought a frantic, nervous energy to her eyes. She used to double and triple check every column, her shoulders tight with the paralyzing fear of making a mistake. But today, she sat there in her practical, faded cotton shirt, not the expensive silk dress she wore to negotiate the deal in the city. Her demeanor had completely transformed. There was a deep, grounded calm to her movements now. Hardship, failed harvests, and time have a way of doing that to a person. You don't ever stop feeling the crushing pressure of responsibility. You just learn how to breathe inside of it. Alex stood near the gate, quietly managing the flow of the line so nobody felt rushed. He didn't need to speak loudly. A gentle nod, a reassuring touch on an older farmer's shoulder, a silent gesture directing the next person forward into the yard. He acted as the quiet protector of the space, creating a physical barrier between the anxiety of the waiting crowd and his wife, ensuring Tuna had the absolute peace she needed to work. Every time a farmer stepped up, Tuna would slide her finger down the frayed, yellowing pages of the ledger, smoothly cross-referencing the weight of the raw cassava they had brought in weeks ago. The practical reality of running a farming cooperative is that it is never just about dirt, rain, and seeds. It is entirely about cash flow. The massive corporations in the city pay when the contract says they will pay, which is often 60 or 90 days late. But the soil doesn't wait. And more importantly, a farmer's daily hunger doesn't wait. When you run a farm that relies on the surrounding community, you must willingly become the shock absorber between the ruthless corporate timeline and the fragile daily survival of your neighbors. As Alex watched the cash pile shrink, he noticed Henry quietly sliding closer to the table, eventually leaning his small, tired head against Tuna's arm. Tuna didn't stop counting. She just wrapped one arm around her son, holding him close, while her ink-stained fingers continued moving down the ledger. The pressure was immense, but in this quiet courtyard, the chaos of survival was met with an unhurried, beautiful grace. The afternoon stretched on, the shadows of the bamboo gate growing longer and darker across the dirt. There is a specific, quiet rhythm to this kind of work. The soft rustle of paper, the low murmur of names, the heavy scrape of wooden chairs. An elderly neighbor, Auntie Hoa, slowly stepped out from the shade of the jackfruit tree and walked up to the table. If you ever want to understand the true, hidden cost of surviving in our village, you only need to look at Auntie Hoa's hands. They are deeply cracked, the skin permanently scarred and stained a faint dusty brown from decades of peeling rough cassava bark and pulling stubborn weeds from unforgiving soil. She didn't say a single word as she handed Tuna her small folded weight slip. Tuna checked the ledger, her finger tracing the faded ink, and pulled an envelope from the stack. But as she prepared to hand it over, a quiet contrast emerged. It was noticeably thicker than the standard payments. A traditional business, operating in an air-conditioned office in the city, would simply calculate the exact decimal point owed for the raw weight delivered, hand over the cash, and close the file. That is the cold, predictable math of profit margins. But Tuna didn't just slide the envelope across the table like a distant bank teller. She stood up slightly, wrapping both of her hands around Auntie Hoa's calloused palms, pressing the envelope directly into them. She leaned in, her voice barely a whisper over the wind shaking the bamboo. "Alex added a little extra for the harvest, Auntie," she said softly. "We know the fertilizer prices went up again this month. Buy some good meat for the grandkids." There was no loud, dramatic speech of gratitude. In our village, profound relief is usually completely silent. Auntie Hoa simply froze. Her cracked fingers gripped the thick paper so tightly that her frail knuckles turned white. Her eyes quickly reddened, brimming with unshed tears, and she offered one sharp, deeply emotional nod before turning away. Just like that, the crushing, invisible weight of a desperately hard month was lifted off a fragile pair of shoulders. As the afternoon wore on, a brief lull finally settled over the yard. The line of neighbors temporarily cleared, leaving only the distant sound of chickens scratching in the dirt and the rhythmic thud of a wooden pestle from a kitchen down the road. It was in this quiet, heavy pause that the physical reality of what we were doing truly caught up with us. Alex walked over from the bamboo gate, his boots scuffing softly against the dry earth, and stood silently behind Tuna's chair. Together, they just stared down at the metal cash box resting on the table. The intimidating mountain of worn bills that had completely covered the wood just 2 hours ago was gone. The box was draining rapidly, our hard-earned reserves visibly shrinking with every transaction. A profound, uncomfortable silence hung in the air between husband and wife as Tuna slowly turned another worn, yellowing page of the ledger, the paper dry and brittle under her fingers. The agonizing trip to the south to secure this export contract had severely drained our family's personal emergency savings. We had gambled everything we had on this one harvest. Looking at the small, pathetic sliver of cash remaining, the silent truth was undeniable. We could have easily kept the surplus profit. We could have paid the village exactly what was contracted, pocketed the extra margins, and instantly rebuilt our own depleted bank account. By all modern business standards, it would have been the safest, smartest choice. Yet, as Alex reached down to wipe a smudge of dust off little Henry's sleeping cheek, he and Tuna shared a long, heavy look of complete mutual understanding. The active choice to distribute bonuses and pay premium rates wasn't an act of naive charity. It was the ultimate, hard-earned lesson in farm survival. When you live in a fragile wooden house surrounded by the elements, you quickly learn that true security is never a number printed on a sterile bank statement. A padded savings account cannot help you pull a heavy canvas tarp, over 3 tons of drying crops when a flash flood hits at midnight. Money alone cannot harvest a rotting field when the tractors break down. The real consequence of this choice was the creation of an invisible fortress. By deliberately choosing to empty our own cash box today, we recognize that our family's only real safety net is the absolute unwavering loyalty of the very people standing in our yard. As the final few neighbors walked down the dirt path toward the main road, the heavy tension in their weary shoulders was visibly gone. Alex leaned against the wooden veranda, watching their silhouettes fade into the evening light. The hidden cost of running a farm like ours is that you can never truly separate your own family's survival from the survival of the village. The practical reality of local economics isn't about sterile corporate profit charts. It's about ensuring the people who bleed into the soil alongside you can actually afford to feed their own children. When a farm becomes the beating heart of a local ecosystem, paying people fairly, promptly, and with deep empathy isn't just an administrative chore. When we ensure that Auntie Hoa and the others have enough to buy decent meat and medicine, they automatically become the unbreakable rear guard for our home. If a sudden typhoon tears the roof off our drying shed next month, or if sickness sweeps through our crops, these are the exact same hands that will show up at our bamboo gate before dawn without ever being asked to help us rebuild. Protecting them is the single most powerful layer of physical and emotional protection we can ever provide for little Henry. The dusty yard was finally completely empty. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm, healing golden glow over the weathered planks of our wooden house. Alex walked back to the table and sat down heavily next to Tuna, slowly wiping a thick layer of sweat and dirt from his forehead. The metal cash box sitting between them was entirely bare. Yet instead of the suffocating, paralyzing anxiety of having no money, the evening air around them felt incredibly light and pure. Suddenly, small, quick footsteps padded across the porch. Henry ran out from the kitchen, his face glowing with innocent joy. He reached out and handed his dad a slightly squished, incredibly sweet wild plum. A small, silent gift left behind by one of the departing farmers. Alex smiled a deep, genuine smile, taking the warm fruit, his rough, soil-stained thumb gently brushing against Henry's tiny fingers. Tuna looked down at the frayed, ink-stained pages of her ledger one last time. She didn't just see a terrifying list of depleted numbers and emptied accounts anymore. She saw the faces and names of dozens of local families who would sleep deeply and safely tonight, with full stomachs and quiet minds, all because of their shared, exhausting hard work. Tuna gently closed the thick, worn-out cover of the ledger, the sound softly echoing in the evening quiet. The transformation in our courtyard was complete. Our own bank account might be dangerously low once again, and the relentless physical work of tomorrow's harvest still waits for us out in the fields. But as the fading afternoon sun finally set over our wooden home, wrapping our small family in a fragile, hard-earned peace, we knew the absolute truth. We had empty pockets, but we had never felt richer. Have you ever had to choose between your own financial security and helping the people around you? Please share your lived experiences in the comments below as we read every single one. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us, and we will see you in the next harvest.